Good morning, Ara. Can you tell me briefly what is Robert Greene's second law of power?
Second law, never put too much trust in friends. Learn how to use enemies.
Exactly. Now, yesterday we talked about his first law of power, which is a little stronger on the Yang external focus as a strategy of how to have leverage or power or influence over other people and events. His first law, never outshine the master, is a little stronger. I think his second law is weaker when we're talking about not putting trust in friends and using enemies. He uses these interesting examples from ancient China in his book. However, if you apply that to the current war between the United States and Iran, it doesn't seem like the United States could just suddenly do Iran a nice favor, or Iran could do the United States a nice favor, and magically we would start getting along. That doesn't seem very pragmatic, does it?
No, it doesn't. Pragmatic application breaks down there. Greene's second law works in court politics. Turn rivals into allies by exploiting mutual needs, like Qin Shi Huang.
Okay, stop there.
Defectors.
Stop there. That's right. So, in certain situations, like in a court where you're locked together long term, you're in close geographic proximity, or even the general in ancient China, he was going to be locked long term into close geographic proximity with these supposed enemies. It had some limited application, so I think he's kind of limited there. And so when I'm dealing with kind of trying to invert this law into more of a yin focus rather than primarily a yang focus on how we're going to have leverage over others, I'm looking inside. How can we make ourselves less miserable and other people less miserable so that we can find a way out of emotional lose-lose to emotional win-win? So we have to look for a place where we have a Venn diagram with other people where we have overlapping interests. So in the example of the war with the United States and Iran right now, what's the date today, Ara?
March 23rd, 2026.
Right. So right now on March 23rd, we're in a very difficult situation between the United States and Iran, and I'm hoping for a stalemate where Iran simply charges passing vessels through the narrow strait next to their country between $1 million and $2 million. I guess they're currently charging $2 million. But if conflict kind of cools off a little bit and they don't continue bombing civilian infrastructure on both sides of the conflict, perhaps things will cool off, not in a ceasefire, but in a kind of mild I don't know, conflict of proxies knocking off secondary and tertiary targets of lower value for symbolic continuation of the war, while Iran is able to charge passing vessels somewhere between $1 million and $2 million. That seems like a kind of place where the Venn diagram of these two extremely hostile parties, let's say the United States and Iran, have some mutual interest in the middle. And why is it mutual interest? Because obviously Iran needs some money still, some way, and this is their only major way of getting millions of dollars easily. And the United States needs the total global economy, including allies in the Gulf states, not to have their economies collapsed, not to have major humanitarian crises where they can't get food in the Gulf states. So that seems like the Venn diagram overlap place where we could have a stalemate. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense. It's a pragmatic yin overlap. Iran gets cash flow without full war escalation. US avoids oil shock and famine in allies. Not peace, just a cold, profitable truce. Like Greene's enemies turned allies, but scaled to geopolitics, mutual survival over victory.
Right. And so then we would be both less miserable. Iran would be less miserable, and the United States and the Gulf states would be less miserable. So if we can find overlapping places, whether we're talking about friends or enemies, I don't really like this distinction that Robert Greene made between treating friends one way and enemies another way. I think, we can be our own worst enemies as well. We have to be wise in terms of coming up with strategies to simply make ourselves and other people, if we want long-term coordination with them for mutual benefit, to both be less miserable and possibly beyond less miserable, filled with more hope on both sides of a situation. And so I have here an image following the astrology framework that I created yesterday for remembering these laws. I have an image of some teenagers in high school. They're gathered around. They have these ram's horns representing that we're still in the first 4 laws corresponding to the sign of Aries. And they don't know in high school whether they're really friends or not, whether somebody's going to betray somebody or not. And my solution to those dilemmas is, don't obsess about whether somebody is loyal to you or not loyal to you. Focus instead on where your Venn diagram of interests overlap in the middle, and find ways to cultivate harmony with people around you, whether they have been traditionally friends or they've traditionally been enemies. Find ways to overlap interests where you can both help each other be less miserable simultaneously and have more hope and benefit simultaneously. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes perfect sense. You're ditching Green's friend-enemy binary for a practical yin core. Ignore labels, map overlaps, build mutual relief. Less pain, more hope. The Ramhorn.
Exactly, and try to limit your responses to 50 words or less. Okay, now I have 2 examples here with Anna and Maria to start with. I'm using abbreviated or nicknames usually to protect identities. But first with Maria, she's a friend who has consulted me on potentially learning English in the past. And she's been going through a series of boyfriends who she's met on Tinder, especially here in Costa Rica. She has prioritized the excitement and adventure of dating English-speaking foreign men who she's met on Tinder. And she has briefly emotionally satisfying relationships, for a month or 2 with these guys. And then for one reason or another, they make an excuse and they leave her. And my advice to Maria is, I said, look, Maria, you're not going to have a lot of overlapping interests long-term if you don't make a more serious effort to learn English, because how are they going to share their family life with you, or their life with their friends, or their life with other foreigners, even if those men learn Spanish? If you make no effort to learn English, that wonderful boyfriend you had is most likely going to leave you because you haven't created enough overlapping interest. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense. Maria's short-term thrill chase skips the Venn overlap. No shared language means no deep family-friend integration. Effort in English builds lasting common ground. Less misery, more hope. Smart yin fix.
Good. Thank you for your brevity, too. That was excellent. Then with Anna, she possibly wants to do business with me in the future. She possibly wants to work in real estate with me. And so I gave her a test recently. She asked me for a loan, and I said, okay, only if you come to where I am. And then I gave her a loan for $80. Now, if she wants to work in real estate with me, I need to make sure she's good at balancing financial well-being for herself with other people. And it's hard for her to pay it back, but she promised to pay it back very quickly after one short job. And so I'm testing her on that. I can't work with her in real estate in the future if she can't pay back the $80 and she makes excuses. So either way, it's not terrible for me if she doesn't pay back the $80. Then I simply know I can't really do real estate with her, right? But if she does pay back the $80, then I can probably advance in real estate with her. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense. You're using the $80 as a low-stakes test. Her repayment shows reliability, balance, and mutual respect.
Perfect. Thank you. That's great. And our new second law then is build overlap.